back again for another segment of the retirement of Edward Rowe. Welcome to segment 4, where I introduce you to the husband. Back in 2009, it was August, we were doing another trip to Washington, D.C., but we'd also made a loop. They're always a loop. So we'd gone up to Toledo. We thought we'd go to Canada and get married, but it was going to be complicated because of my ex-wife and my life back there and everything. So we decided that we would include a trip to Connecticut, but not as part of the loop. So we went and got a hotel in Washington, D.C., got up at 4:30 in the morning, drove up I-95 to exit number 1 in Connecticut, which is Greenwich, Connecticut, and had this really sweet Southern lady from Savannah marry us. And it was an indulgence on Mickey's part, because back in 2009, Connecticut was the closest place where gay men could get married, and it didn't mean anything in Florida. So Mickey goes, you know what, Lester, he doesn't like calling me partner because he was an accountant in a previous life, and partners are somebody you go into business with, and lovers, that just doesn't have permanence. And besides that, I called a person a wife for 25 years. That didn't really mean much to me to say that, because it was kind of like an obligation. So I wanted to be serious about a marriage and calling somebody a husband, and it wasn't going to be really a husband unless we were married. So Mickey did this for me. So we got married, August 2009. Went back. By 5:30 that night, we were back in Washington, D.C., in the DuPont neighborhood, having a very gay first supper as a married couple. Came back to Florida, where truly the marriage didn't mean anything at all. 4 years later, the politics, and Edie Windsor had her wife die. They got married in Canada, and she filed a tax return, and because the townhouse in Manhattan was in her wife's name, there was $130,000 in taxes owing on the inheritance of a house that they had shared together as wives for decades. So she sued. The decision came down one day in June when Mickey and I were on a trip to St. Petersburg. He was on a training program with FAU. So he had gone off training that morning in June. And so I came down and I went out to Safeway to buy something for breakfast. But just as I was leaving the hotel room, the Windsor decision was announced, and all of a sudden we could file joint tax returns. Well, it wasn't really sure what it was going to mean, or whether it was going to apply to couples living in Florida, because this was a New York decision. But all of a sudden, the government seemed to be willing to recognize married gay and lesbian couples. So I go down through the lobby and I pass the concierge's desk, and they ask, "Good morning, how are you today?" And I said, "I'm fantastic." I said, "It looks like the Supreme Court has just ruled in a way that the federal government is going to have to recognize my marriage to my husband." And they go, "Oh, congratulations." So I go off to Safeway and I come back. This is a Marriott hotel, by the way, owned by Mormons. And I come back and I find this on the credenza in our hotel room, which was very sweet. So we had already filed a precautionary tax return for 2009, and by September that year, so the Windsor decision came down in June, by September that year, we got a letter from the IRS, and I got home later than Mickey, and he saw the letter from the IRS, and he goes, "What have you done? Why are we having this? Is this something related?" Because there's no good mail that comes from the IRS. And it was a cryptic letter, and lo and behold, below that letter was a check for $5,950, an amended tax return for 1 year, 2009. Got to remember, this whole time, Mickey had talked me into going back to university. I was a full-time student. I had no income. So we amended 2010, 2011, 2012. We filed 2013, and we had $16,000 worth of tax refunds. So this is what I teach my students. As a U.S. history teacher, I teach them, you are not being oppressed when another group gains rights that you've always had. So by the time we got all the way to the finishing our tax returns and getting them all fixed up, we had $16,000 in tax refunds, and we were sitting on a savings account. So what did we do with it? We bought this little teeny tiny house. So that is Mickey Rowe, the husband. That's a story that not everybody can tell. We still aren't recognized in Florida, but we can file federal tax returns, which is really cool. And Stay tuned to find out about segment 5, Mickey Rowe, the Survivor.